Sister called me a disappointment and a loser at a family meeting. I showed her some documents. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. My sister stood in front of our entire family, called me a disappointment and a loser, and laughed like it was the truth. She thought I had nothing to show for myself, but I had documents in my bag that would change everything. My name is Amanda, and this is the story of how my sister's cruelty pushed me to reveal a truth no one saw coming. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. For as long as I can remember, my sister Rachel had a way of making me feel small. She was the one who shined in every room, the one my parents adored, the one people always compared me to. I was the quiet one, the one who worked hard but never spoke much about it. While Rachel loved showing off her clothes, vacations, and career highlights, I preferred keeping things to myself. I didn't need applause. Or at least I thought I didn't, until her words that day cut so deep I could barely breathe. It happened at a family meeting, the kind where everyone sits around the table pretending to be supportive, but old rivalries sit right under the surface. My parents had gathered us to talk about important matters. I came prepared, though no one knew it. In my bag I carried papers I had been holding onto for months. I didn't plan to use them unless I had to, but as soon as Rachel opened her mouth, I knew the moment had come. She looked directly at me, smirked, and said, "Why are we even listening to Amanda? She's a disappointment, a loser who never made anything of her life." Her laugh filled the room, and others chuckled nervously. No one stepped in to defend me, not even my parents. They sat there, silent, as if her words were the truth. I could feel my hands shaking, but not from shame. It was from the strength it took to stay calm. For years, I had swallowed her insults, pretending they didn't matter, but inside they always left scars. That day, though, I wasn't the same Amanda she grew up mocking. I wasn't the weak sister anymore. I had built something for myself, and it was time she saw it. In that moment, I realized life sometimes gives us a choice, to let others define us, or to finally stand up and reveal who we really are. Rachel thought she had silenced me, but she had no idea I was about to turn the tables in a way that would leave her speechless. Growing up in my family never felt fair. I was the older child, but I was treated like the shadow. My sister Rachel was 2 years younger than me, yet she was the center of every conversation. From a very young age, people praised her for being pretty, lively, and quick with her words. She had this natural charm that made others want to be around her, while I was the quiet one who often stayed in the background. It didn't take long for me to realize that in our parents' eyes, Rachel could do no wrong. Whenever Rachel walked into a room, our parents' faces lit up. They would ask her about her grades, her friends, her plans, and then turn to me with far less interest. I did well in school, worked hard, and stayed out of trouble, but that never seemed enough. No matter what I achieved, it was brushed aside with comments like, "Rachel will do even better," or "Why can't you be more like her?" I carried those words with me through childhood, and they shaped the way I saw myself. Rachel enjoyed being compared to me because it always placed her above. She thrived on the attention, on being called the star of the family. I was the quiet sister who didn't crave the spotlight, but the constant comparisons made me feel like I was invisible. Every holiday or birthday gathering turned into a stage for her to show off her talents, her looks, or her latest story. I was just the one sitting beside her, smiling weakly, pretending it didn't bother me. As we grew older, the difference only grew clearer. Rachel built a lifestyle that looked glamorous from the outside. She dressed in expensive clothes, posted about her promotions, and always talked loudly about her next big goal. Our parents admired her confidence and told everyone how proud they were of her. Meanwhile, my efforts were smaller and quieter. I worked steadily, avoided unnecessary drama, and focused on building a life I could manage. But instead of being respected for my stability, I was treated as if I lacked ambition. Family dinners were the hardest. Rachel somehow always found a way to turn the conversation into an opportunity to put me down. She would say things like, "Amanda never speaks up because she has nothing interesting to say," or "She doesn't understand how to live like an adult." She made those remarks with a smile, as if it were a harmless joke, but I knew it wasn't. And the painful part was that nobody corrected her. People either laughed with her or stayed quiet, which felt even worse. By the time I reached my 30s, I had grown used to being treated as the lesser sibling. It hurt, but I learned to swallow it and keep moving forward. What nobody realized was that I wasn't weak. I was just patient. Rachel could keep her spotlight, but I was quietly building something stronger. When my parents called for a family meeting, I already had a feeling of what it would be like. They said it was about important matters concerning the family property and inheritance. Just hearing those words made my stomach tighten. I knew how these talks usually went. Rachel shining in the middle of the conversation, while I sat quietly in the corner, treated like my opinion didn't matter. Still, I told myself this time would be different, because I was bringing something with me that no one expected. On the day of the meeting, I got dressed in simple clothes, nothing fancy or loud. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I wanted to walk in as the same Amanda they always saw, the quiet one, the sister who usually let Rachel dominate the room. But inside, I was holding a kind of strength I had never carried before. I slipped a folder into my bag and made sure it was safely tucked away. That folder held papers that could change the direction of the entire discussion, but I kept calm, saying nothing about it. The meeting was set up in the dining room, the same room where most family gatherings took place. My parents sat at the head of the table, serious and focused. Rachel arrived looking as though she was ready for a performance, dressed sharply, speaking loudly, already making jokes before the talk even started. I sat down quietly, listening as my parents explained that they wanted to settle things about the property. It was clear this was a big step for them, and they wanted everything decided while they were still in control. As soon as Rachel realized what the discussion was about, she leaned back in her chair with a smirk. She had always believed that most of what our parents owned would naturally belong to her. She acted like she was the obvious choice to take responsibility. I didn't interrupt or argue. I just sat there, hands folded, waiting for the right moment. While they discussed different possibilities, Rachel kept finding small chances to remind everyone how responsible and capable she was. She even dropped a few comments meant to underline my silence. "Well, I guess Amanda won't have much to add, she never does," she said once, laughing to herself. I stayed calm, even though inside her words pressed like sharp edges. I wasn't there to argue on her level. I was there to let the truth reveal itself when the time was right. The folder in my bag felt heavier with every passing minute, almost like it carried not just papers but years of being overlooked. Nobody around that table knew what I had brought with me. Nobody expected me to have anything important to say. That was exactly why the timing had to be perfect. I kept my eyes steady, waiting quietly, knowing that before the night ended, the balance of power in that room would never be the same again. The meeting had been going on for a while when my father finally turned toward me. He asked if I had anything to say about the property and the decisions they were trying to make. For a second, the room grew quiet, and all eyes shifted in my direction. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could even finish my first sentence, Rachel cut across my words. "Why are we even listening to her?" she said loudly, her voice carrying a sharpness that made everyone stop. She leaned forward in her chair, smirking as if she had just made the most obvious point. "She's done nothing with her life. She's a disappointment and a loser." Her laugh rang out, echoing against the walls, and it was followed by the awkward sound of others chuckling under their. The nervous laughter stung more than her actual words. It wasn't just Rachel humiliating me. It was the silence of everyone else, the way nobody thought to step in, the way even my parents kept their eyes down. In that moment, I felt like I had been pushed back into the same corner I had always been forced into, the one where my voice didn't matter and my presence was treated like an afterthought. I sat there still, my hands pressed tightly together in my lap. My face burned and I could feel tears forming, but I refused to let them fall. I kept my head straight, pretending her words didn't cut through me, even though inside they did. I had heard her insult me so many times before, but in front of everyone, in the middle of such an important conversation, it was harsher than ever. She wanted to break me down, and for a second, I almost let her succeed. No one spoke up to correct her. No one told her she had gone too far. The silence of the room was louder than her laugh, and that silence said everything about how they all saw me. In their eyes, Rachel's words carried truth. It was easier for them to laugh nervously than to challenge her. That hurt more than her voice. But as I sat there, holding back the tears, I also felt the weight of something else. I remembered the folder in my bag, hidden under the table by my feet. My heart pounded at the thought of it. I knew she believed I had nothing to bring, no proof of any worth, no accomplishments to put on display. That's why she had no fear in mocking me so openly. She thought I was powerless. I let her laugh, I let them smirk, and I stayed quiet, because I knew something they didn't. Beneath my calm expression, I was holding a secret powerful enough to shatter every false belief in that. Rachel thought she had won by humiliating me, but what she didn't know was that the real moment hadn't even begun. What Rachel and the rest of my family never understood was that while they were busy judging me, I was busy building a life they couldn't see. I didn't talk about it at dinners or bring it up during holidays, because I never wanted to live the way Rachel did, loud and flashy, always showing off. My way was different. I worked quietly, step by step, carrying responsibilities that no one else cared to notice. After college, I had loans and bills that felt endless. While Rachel was spending money on vacations and expensive clothes, I was learning how to stretch every dollar, how to make payments on time, and how to survive without help from anyone. It wasn't glamorous, but I was determined not to sink. Slowly, I cleared my debts, one paycheck at a time. It took years, but with every balance paid off, I felt a little stronger, a little freer. Once I managed to stand on solid ground, I started saving. I took extra shifts, picked up side projects, and pushed myself harder than I thought I could. I didn't have much of a social life, but I knew why I was doing it. I wanted security. I wanted something real to hold on to, something no insult could take away from me. While Rachel was out chasing attention, I was chasing stability. That focus eventually opened a door I never expected. Through work, I made connections with people in real estate. At first, I only helped with small projects, handling paperwork, and assisting with background details. But the more I learned, the more I realized how much potential there was in it. I saved enough to invest, not loudly, but carefully, becoming a silent partner in a growing business. My role wasn't public, and I preferred it that way. I didn't need my name on a banner. I just needed my stake in something that would grow steadily over time. And it did grow. Month by month, the returns improved, and my confidence along with. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was building. I never told my family about it, because I knew how they were. Rachel would have mocked me, said it was too small or not impressive enough. My parents wouldn't have cared until they saw big results. So, I kept it to myself, quietly watching as my position strengthened. What none of them could have guessed was that I had taken things one step further. With careful planning and patience, I had managed to purchase shares in the very family property they were discussing at that meeting. It wasn't flashy, and it wasn't something I announced. But it was real. It gave me rights they didn't know I had, rights that mattered more than their laughter. They thought I had nothing. They thought I was weak. But sitting at that table, they had no idea the strongest hand in the room was mine. Rachel couldn't resist another chance to jab at me. As my father tried to bring me back into the conversation, she leaned forward, rolled her eyes, and said, "Why don't we just skip her? Amanda doesn't have anything important to add. She never does." Her laugh came sharp and smug, filling the room the same way it always did. But this time, I didn't shrink back. I didn't look down at my hands or pretend it didn't sting. Instead, I reached calmly into my bag, pulled out the folder I had been keeping close, and placed it on the table in front of me. The sound of it hitting the polished wood made the whole room go still. Rachel's smile faltered for just a moment, like she didn't understand what was happening. I slid the papers out and opened them, laying one sheet after another in neat order. Deeds, financial statements, contracts. For the first time that evening, every eye was on me, not Rachel. My voice stayed steady as I explained. These documents show proof of my investment and ownership in the property we're discussing. In fact, over the last few years, I've been able to secure enough shares to hold majority rights. The words sank in slowly, but the reaction was instant. Shock crossed my parents' faces. My mother's hand froze halfway to her glass. My father leaned back in his chair as though he needed space to take it all in. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, she didn't have a quick reply. I pointed to the deeds, my fingers firm and sure. "These are legal transfers showing my ownership. And here," I said, placing another page in front of them, "are the financial records showing my role as a silent partner. I've been building this quietly for years." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult I had ever endured. Nobody laughed now. Nobody dared to. They were too busy reading over the papers, too busy realizing that the person they had dismissed as irrelevant was the very person who now held control over the future of the property. Rachel's voice finally cracked through the air. This has to be a mistake. There's no way she..." But even as she tried to speak, her eyes darted over the documents, and the color drained from her face. She couldn't deny what was right in front of her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just sat still, letting the truth speak louder than any words I could ever say. For years, they had treated me as though I had no power, no voice, no worth. Yet in that moment, the truth was undeniable. I was the one in control. I was the decision-maker. Rachel's face changed the moment she realized what those papers meant. The confidence she always carried slipped away, replaced with something I had never seen in her before: fear. She leaned forward, scanning the documents as if she might find a mistake, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped through the pages. This can't be right," she stammered, her voice cracking. "There has to be some misunderstanding." She turned toward our parents, desperate for support, but they stayed quiet. For once, they didn't rush to defend her. They looked just as stunned as she did, their eyes fixed on the papers spread across the table. Rachel tried again, her voice louder this time. "She doesn't know what she's doing. These documents don't mean anything. I've always been the one capable of handling things. I should be the one making decisions here. But her words sounded hollow, weaker than I had ever heard them. My father slowly adjusted his glasses and leaned in to read one of the deeds. His face turned pale as the reality sank in. He looked at me, then at Rachel, then back at me again. My mother pressed her lips together, not saying a word. The silence between them said more than anything. They couldn't deny what was on the table. The truth was clear. Rachel's panic grew as she realized she was losing control. She gestured wildly at me, trying to paint me as untrustworthy. She's been hiding things from us. How could she go behind our backs like this? This isn't fair. Her voice rose higher with each word, but no one echoed her anger. For the first time, the power she always held over the room was gone. The laughter she had thrown at me earlier now felt small, meaningless. The very people who once encouraged her arrogance were sitting in silence, struggling to process the fact that the sister they had dismissed held the upper hand. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't argue. I let her unravel in front of everyone, because the truth didn't need me to fight for it. It stood solid on its own. Every page of those documents proved what I had quietly built, and no amount of shouting could change that. Rachel's face grew red as tears threatened to spill. She slammed her hand on the table and muttered, "This isn't over," but her voice shook, betraying her. The strong, glamorous sister who always strutted into every room with confidence now looked small and defeated. I sat quietly, not smiling, not gloating. I simply let the weight of the moment settle. The sister who called me a loser was powerless, and she knew it. For once, everyone in that room saw Rachel for what she was. Not the star, not the favored child, but someone whose arrogance had finally met its match. I didn't need to raise my voice or throw back the insults Rachel had hurled at me. I just sat there, steady, letting the papers on the table speak for me. They were enough. For once, the room wasn't filled with her laughter or her cutting remark. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every second feel heavy. When I finally did speak, my tone was calm and clear. "I've already made arrangements regarding the property," I said, my words measured. "My priority is to ensure it stays within the family and is used in a way that benefits everyone, not just one person's ego." I looked directly at my parents, then back at the documents in front of me. "I've planned for its upkeep, the taxes, and its long-term value. This isn't just about ownership, it's about responsibility." My parents exchanged glances, still surprised but listening closely. They weren't used to hearing me speak with such certainty. Normally, I would fade into the background, letting Rachel take the lead. But now I had their attention, and I made every word count. "I know I've never been the loudest one here," I continued, "but I've spent years making sure I could handle something like this. I've been careful, patient, and deliberate. I'm not here to brag or to show off. I'm here because this matters to me, and I want it handled the right way." Rachel shifted in her chair, looking smaller with every passing second. She tried to interrupt once or twice, but her voice sounded thin, and no one gave her the space to take over. The silence she had never allowed me before was finally mine. I outlined how the property would be maintained, the steps I had already taken to ensure it was secure, and how its future would be stable under my direction. There was no anger in my voice, no bitterness, just facts. Cold, steady facts that no one could argue against. The same family that once dismissed me as incapable now had no choice but to acknowledge my strength. The air in the room felt different. The silence that followed wasn't the silence of indifference I had endured my whole life. This was the silence of realization, the silence of people who had misjudged me for years and were now seeing me clearly for the first time. I didn't look at Rachel as I spoke. I didn't need to. Her presence no longer had the power it once did. She had always relied on cutting me down to feel tall, but now her words meant nothing. My calm authority was louder than her insults had ever been. When I finished, I leaned back and folded my hands, letting the weight of it all settle. I didn't need revenge in the form of shouting or anger. My revenge was in the truth, the simple fact that I was the one who had proved capable, the one who held control, the one who was finally seen. The silence after I finished speaking lingered for a long time. It wasn't the uneasy quiet that used to follow Rachel's cruel remarks. This time it carried weight. My parents looked at me with expressions I had rarely seen before. There was surprise, of course, but also something more, respect. For the first time, I wasn't the daughter they brushed aside. I was the one who had taken control when it mattered most. My father cleared his throat, as if he wasn't sure how to put his thoughts into words. My mother kept her gaze on the documents, her lips pressed tightly together. They didn't rush to speak like they usually did when Rachel wanted validation. Instead, they stayed quiet, giving me space I had never been given in my entire life. Rachel sat across from me, frozen. She didn't dare meet my eyes. The same sister who had laughed at me, who had thrown insult after insult, now couldn't even look in my direction. Her shoulders slumped as though the fight had drained out of her. For once, she didn't have a clever remark or a sharp laugh to fill the air. The power she had always used to control the room was gone. Inside, I felt something shift. Years of humiliation, years of being the one no one listened to, the one constantly belittled, began to loosen their grip on me. It was as if all the weight I had carried on my back for so long was finally lifting. I could breathe in a way I hadn't been able to before. It wasn't about the property anymore, not entirely. It was about what it represented. All those years I had been quiet, working hard, moving forward without recognition, had finally led to this moment. The people who once dismissed me were now seeing the truth. And that truth was simple. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a disappointment. I was capable. My parents finally spoke, but their voices were softer than usual. My mother said she hadn't realized how much I had been doing on my own. My father nodded, agreeing quietly, admitting that he had underestimated me. Their words weren't dramatic, but they carried meaning I had never heard before. They were seeing me as someone who mattered, not as the background figure I had always been in Rachel's shadow. Rachel still didn't speak. She kept her eyes on the table, her face pale, her hands twisting in her lap. The silence around her wasn't protecting her anymore. It was exposing her. Every cruel thing she had ever said about me now stood against her, and she couldn't take any of it back. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Just sitting there, calm and steady, was enough. The moment itself was my victory. And as I looked around the room, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. The years of pain were still part of me, but now they no longer defined me. As the meeting came to a close, I sat back and let everything settle. The papers were still spread out across the table, their meaning impossible to deny. My parents stayed quiet, my sister kept her head down, and for once I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt steady, strong, and sure of myself in a way I had never experienced before. Walking out of that room, I thought about all the times Rachel had mocked me, all the times she had called me worthless. Her words had left scars, but now those same words had lost their power. They didn't define me anymore. She could call me a disappointment, she could call me a loser, but the truth was standing tall in front of her, and she couldn't escape it. In that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes the people who stay quiet, the ones who don't make a show of their lives, are the ones building the strongest foundations. I had spent years working silently, not for recognition, but because I wanted something real. And that steady work had become my shield. It was the very thing that gave me strength when I needed it most. Revenge wasn't about yelling or throwing her insults back at her. It wasn't about trying to hurt her the way she had hurt me. Real revenge came in the form of truth, calm and undeniable. All I had to do was place those documents on the table and let them speak. That was enough. That was more powerful than any loud argument could ever be. As I looked at Rachel, avoiding my eyes, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel the urge to smile at her downfall. What I felt was freedom. For years, she had held control over me with her words, but now that control was gone. She had mocked me in front of everyone, only to be silenced by reality. That was victory enough. When I finally stood up, I felt lighter. It wasn't just about owning property or being the decision-maker. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about proving to myself that patience, resilience, and hard work could rise above cruelty. I didn't need their constant approval anymore. I had built my own respect, and that was something no one could take away. As I walked away, I thought to myself, my sister called me a disappointment, but I learned something that day. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones building the strongest foundations. Revenge doesn't always mean screaming back. Sometimes it means letting the truth speak for itself. I left the room not as the forgotten sister, not as the one who had been mocked, but as someone who finally understood her own worth. Betrayal had hurt me, but patience had healed me. And in the end, dignity was the greatest revenge I could ever have.